I was just such a party girl for so many years and was very normalized. Everyone around me was a party girl. Like I was definitely in the upper echelon of like, of my friends. Like I could drink more. I had this whole like I'm Ukrainian, I can drink anyone under the table. I'd have this like, ego around it. Yeah, it was normalized in society. Thank goodness, with all the health tracking that's going on, and the younger generations are turning away from alcohol these days, are recognizing it for what it is. They have their own coping mechanisms like vaping, so we're not going to,
Sure.
yeah, there's lots of other things, but it was so normalized that I didn't know that there was another way, like throughout college and university and everything, like that's just how you did it. And also I had careers, so I worked in hospitality and like there was a lot of drinking there. And then I sold wine for a living. So there was a lot of drinking there. It was literally part of the job to drink wine. And
Right.
eventually, instead of it being like a celebratory thing or something you do for fun to elevate the mood, it was just like an everyday thing. Like there was an excuse to drink. If you're sad, you drink. If you're angry, you drink. If you're happy, you drink. Like it's always like a reason to drink. And I was in a relationship with someone who was sober. So he had quite a challenging relationship with alcohol himself. He had almost died through blah, blah, blah. And so my problematic tendencies started to be highlighted in contrast to him not drinking at all. Now, at first, I
Mm.
drank less and less because I'm like, oh, I could just have a glass of wine. I don't need to have a bottle of wine, right? So, at first, it became like better. And then, when we had challenges in the relationship, I turned to the alcohol and the wine as a coping mechanism. And that was part of the demise of the relationship. There were other reasons, but I remember him saying, like, you need to look at this. This is not okay and
Mm.
not normal. And that was the beginning of my 7 years of sober curiosity. Like at first I resisted it and be like, what are you talking about? Like I'm fine, I got this under control. And then I would start to notice that my productivity was dwindling, my inspiration, my motivation. I would have lots of ideas. I just couldn't seem to follow through on them because the dopamine that I was supposed to use to progress in a project or hit a goal, whatever, that dopamine I was just using up on cheap alcohol, like, on just like drinking. And so
Yeah.
yeah, all of like that trend kind of like started to like diminish. My health wasn't the best. I wasn't feeling great in my body. Like I was inflamed. Um, I wasn't like making conscious health choices and eating choices. I would like drink, watch series, like doom scroll, like all these things.
Mm.
I'd still show up for my responsibilities, and like I'd coach and I had amazing clients, and I actually had the most amazing lifestyle where I lived on the beachfront. I flew class all over the world, teaching, training, coaching. But there was this like loneliness hole, this like core wound that I'd never addressed from childhood because I hadn't learned yet the inner child work and to address it. And so the very first feeling that I ever remember feeling as a child was loneliness, like cosmic loneliness, like
Mm.
nobody. And with loneliness, it's like it's not that you don't have people, but it's like nobody really gets you like at your core, and so I was like
Yeah.
drowning this loneliness feeling, this loneliness wound for years and years and years until it just became unsustainable, right? The drinking became daily, the hangovers became gnarly. I was keeping up with my responsibilities, but I wasn't chasing any new responsibilities, right? Or growth or growing anything because what started to happen, Davina, is I stopped trusting myself. Meaning,
Mm.
like, start to make promises to myself, like, oh, I'm not drinking today, and by 5 p.m. I'd be drinking. And so I'd start to train myself that if I make a promise to myself, I'm not able to keep it. And that became my new reality. And so then, everything suffered from there, like the business, the health, the relationships and friendships and everything. And there was a couple of years of deterioration. And then it wasn't all bad. There'd be cycles, like if it was all terribly bad, I would have ended up in rehab many, many moons before I actually stopped drinking. At one stage, I hired a sobriety coach because I was just really sick and tired of my own just stuff, and being
Shit.
sick and tired.
Yeah.
Yes. And I was struggling so hard, like in secret. I didn't want to tell anyone. I had a lot of shame around it because I was like, I'm too young. I had all these stories like, I'm too young to be struggling with this. This is like an older person's thing. I'm so smart. Like, I'm a human behavior specialist. I help people all the time with their mindsets and shifting things for them. Why can't I figure it out myself? All of these narratives that
Yeah.
kept me so, so stuck. And luckily with the sobriety coach, it worked for a little bit until it didn't. And then that took another year of relapses and in and outs. And I really believe that every relapse brought me closer to the day I finally said, no more. So relapse is part of recovery. I don't really use recovery because I feel recovery is very much the 12 steps, which I respect a lot. I have just never been through them myself. The system that I've created with Habit Freedom is a little bit different. I'm obviously aware of the 12 steps, but yeah, I really found like those relapses, every single one had a message for me. And I was only done with that cycle where I didn't need alcohol to numb out anymore once I was finally done with that cycle. And the one thing that really kept me going and not giving up was just understanding that I would have to end this habit, the cycle, eventually. Like, it would have to end either today or in a year or in 10 years or a different lifetime. But eventually all cycles end. So the thing that I kept saying to myself is like, you have to figure this out. You have to figure this out either now or later. So if you just never give up trying to figure it out, and even if it's like a million different relapses and a million different lessons, doesn't matter, just keep it up. And I really believe that that's the thing that got me to the other side.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much here. Very similar. There's a lot of these things that we kind of logically know better. Not even kind of. We absolutely logically know better. And then emotionally, these things just don't quite our logical brain can't quite overwhelm our emotional brain for quite some time. And yes, with each one of these relapses, either in behavior or otherwise, we will kind of have a new blind spot brought to our attention. And that's why we're constantly working it, because new and different life experiences are going to bring up so many things that we likely didn't even know were there. And my husband is 2 days shy of 4 years sober from alcohol. It has been a journey to like no one's business. And it is the greatest thing, because once he found sobriety, he works the steps, and he's active in AA and doing these things. It's kind of the only thing that worked for him after he resisted that whole process for so many years. It was something that once he stopped being so problematic, I then took the spotlight. Because before, his was so big and so loud and so wild that my drinking that I was doing right alongside him was just more under the radar. I still had my practice. I was doing all of these things. We were parents to 2 children. It didn't quite seem as quote unquote bad until he got sober and he was doing the work, and I had a harder time stopping. And my behaviors were very much spotlighted, and it was easy for me for so long to let him be the problem until I really had no choice. Now he's the calm one and I'm the one acting wild in our arguments, right? Now he's the sober one, but I'm the one going out and drinking with friends and waking up with booze on my breath and anxiety and not feeling good, right? And so around that time, I made the conscious decision to take a look at the way that I was drinking and recognize how problematic it was, and see less about shitting on myself and less about like why I didn't see this before, or the fact that alcohol was just part of my personality at that point. It became one of these things where I started showing myself more grace. And that's what I think a lot of us who are having challenges within this or within anger management, which is the main thing that I do, there's so much shame and judgment and ridicule for ourselves that it's almost like if I'm going to better myself, then I have to see those things and see all of that ugly, and I'm just not prepared for it because I don't know how to see it without just destroying my sense of self as a result of it. And so one of the biggest things that I had to do around that time and that I'm still doing, hence this morning when I'm running late and I woke up late and we started 40 minutes later than we were anticipating and I was, panicking a little bit inside. What I had to remind myself of here and time again is that it's not about what we did before when we didn't know any better, or even when we did know better, we just didn't know how to do better. It's more so about now that we're aware of it, what are we going to do about it? And that's where I think a lot of our suffering comes from, is knowing that we can do better. We also are knowing how we can do better. And then we just get stuck in actually taking the action. And that's kind of where we are now, where now we communicate about these things. He's obviously at 4 years, nearly 4 years completely sober. There's these types of things that now when we look back on these previous versions, we almost give them different names, right? Like the previous version of me, she is by her maiden name. Even though we were married already, she's my maiden name. She is all of these wounds that hadn't been addressed. And now she's Hain, my married name. And this is what me and my husband really take on together, because he also changed his last name when we got married. He dropped a hyphen. And so there's that part that many of us get stuck in. And what I love about your rawness and how just transparent you are in your story and in your experience is that it's not just, yeah, I knew better and then I just did. You're sharing so much of the detail, so much of this rich data that a lot of us keep quiet out of many reasons. But this is the kind of thing that people need to hear. They need to know that you weren't just this person who saw this happening and was like, I'm going to go around and fix people. That you know exactly what it's like to live in those depths, to feel destroyed within your sense of self and watch it kind of chisel away little by little through the ways that we lie to ourselves, through the ways that we stop trusting ourselves and end up being the number one person in our lives that is causing us the most amount of harm. That if our behaviors were embodied in somebody else, we wouldn't let them near us. And yet we can't escape us. And so we make excuses and we make that okay. And so I love the story. I love your story and how you're sharing it and how raw and real and truthful you're being here. So tell me about habit freedom and what, I'll give you a chance. I'm always like, I don't give people time to respond after I share about that.
I love your story so much because I feel I could definitely resonate with, we look at another person and be like, oh, that's what a problem looks like. Mine is not a problem, right? And what's also highlighted is like what a blessing it was. Like sometimes the bigger the problem, the bigger of a blessing it is, because then you have to face it. So many people are living in this mediocrity and this gray scale of a life and just like numbing out, microdosing numbing.
Yes.
And they're like, 5 years goes by, what have I done with my life? 10 years goes by, what have I done with my life? 50 years goes by, what have I done with my life? And the problem is never big enough for them to then have to look at like the childhood wound that you're numbing out, that you're microdosing the numbing. Well, someone like me was macrodosing the numbing at one stage, but at the end of the day, what a privilege it's been to have such a big quote unquote problem. When someone comes to me the other day, they're like, oh, so did you have a drinking problem? I said, no, my friend, I had a drinking solution. So they're like, fair enough. And these were my problems, So I absolutely love that you shared that. And sometimes when we're in microdosing the numbing, it's so much harder. Like you said, you had such a harder time with it because it's so much harder because you can justify anything to yourself, right? And be like, it's not that bad, it's not that bad. And luckily, we have these imaginations. And so when I work with clients, most of them don't have rock bottoms, just by the way. Just because I had a pretty severe rock bottom, which I'm happy to share a little bit about. I had like this intense 2-week bender and like woke up, like did a self-imposed, what are those when you sit someone down, like someone in your family, and you're like, right,
Intervention.
I did a self-imposed intervention. So what that looked like, Davina, was I woke up from this 2-week bender feeling so much disgust and shame. And oh, I can still remember the nausea like creeping up my throat if I really get present with it. And I was like, right, I can't do this. Like I'm going to really harm myself if I don't change something, right? And I've been struggling with this for 7 years. So I typed out this really long message. Didn't really like read over it again because I knew that if I had overthunk it, that I was never going to send it. And I sent it to like 6 or 7, maximum 8 people that were like close-ish at the time. Some of them weren't even that close, but I was like, right, I need to like tell people now. I need this like public accountability to at least, a handful of people. And so saying that, most of the clients that I work with don't have a rock bottom. They have this mediocrity that they're sick and tired of. And the reason why they don't need a rock bottom to change their behavior or their limiting habits is because we have an imagination, so we can fear escape and we can imagine what it's going to be like if we continue to microdose the numbing. If we continue the doom scrolling, the vaping, the drinking, the overeating sugar or emotional eating, whatever it is for us, the gambling, the shopping, and we're like, okay, if I really rack this up, this is going to have this compound interest and compound effect on me. And I don't want to be that in 5 to 10 years. So let me stop that now. And so I find our imaginations is one of the greatest tools to start to break free from the limiting habits.